Hello, welcome once again to Living and Active. You're going to find this video on the analytical hermeneutics playlist whenever I post it. No idea when that's going to be. I have motivation and desire to film this video, but I didn't get it done today while it's still in my head. But I don't really have the motivation to necessarily go through all of this stuff of getting the equipment together to process the video and upload it and all this other stuff. So I'm going to record it now, and whenever I publish it is when it gets published. But if you saw it in the post community tab or whatever, I recently linked a video from the 1960s by the Bell telecommunications company, Babel, if you're old enough to remember that. And it was a scientific documentary, about half an hour long, called "It's About Time," and they explore and discuss how it is that we keep time. The things that we use to keep track of the time of day and how accurate they are. And then I went into absolute zero dork 30 territory with it, and I included a link to another video from a channel called Rob Words. He's even bigger word nerd than I am, and he's good at it. So I mean, his content has value, lots of value. But it got me thinking. Probably the most undervalued, but yet currently relevant scriptural story, quote unquote, of God's judgment is the Tower of Babel. And a lot of people start with the construction of the tower, but when considering the Tower of Babel, I think it is necessary to begin with what the Tower of Babel was in rebellion against. God had instructed men to be fruitful, multiply, and fill the earth, to go out throughout all the earth and replenish the earth, all the land masses, to all of the places where there was land. They were supposed to spread out, but instead of doing that, because that would be hard work and all of these other things, they decided to band together for the sake of convenience into a mass settlement and then erect a tower to heaven to prove themselves something. So that's the groundwork for the Tower of Babel. It was an open act of rebellion against God's command for people to go out in their family groups. They all had one language at this time. To go out in their family groups and do what they were originally supposed to do from creation, which is to just be about the business of having their own piece of land and living well in reliance upon the Lord. They didn't want to do this. They were probably the original many hands make light work people. And there's nothing wrong with cooperative work, but they took it to the extreme and that led to rebellion. But I think what's important to notice is that if you ask any entomologist, anybody that actually does the word nerd thing professionally, they will tell you that every single modern day language came from one of a small group of proto-languages that they can all be traced to common ancestry to, but they don't go beyond the proto language groups, because then if they do, then they're in Genesis territory and they don't want to go there, so they always stop there. They don't go to the one shared language because that would be in agreement with what Scripture says, and they don't want to do that no matter the cost. But I think it's if you listen to how words form and change and evolve over the year. I'm a big one for words have a meaning that they're supposed to retain, and it is the fact that people read scripture contained in the Bibles that they have in their native languages, but allow the cultural language that is being spoken in their native tongue to change the meaning of the words that they might find in scripture, which changes understanding, which leads to deception, which leads to uh, spiritual immaturity and errant worship and scriptural illiteracy. And all of this, of course, is by design, whatever. But I think it makes sense to me, looking at it, that the judgment, the dispersion of people, because they were scattered, first their languages were confused, and then they were scattered according to their language groups, and they had no choice but to get away from each other just so they could manage and settle down in their groups, whatever, at various parts of the country, so they had enough room for those groups to grow and flourish. Um, I think that I don't think that that was a one day, one done thing. I think that that was a continuous judgment against humanity, and I think it's in place today. Obviously, it's in place, the effects of it are in place because we have all these different languages, whatever. But I think the fact that these languages never stopped changing and evolving and finding points of divergence into other languages, I think that that is a sign that it is an act of judgment. I think even when you come to the generational level, every generation has its own set of slang, or regional dialects or whatever. Even the main base languages that people supposedly have in common are constantly being fragmented and specialized and diverging from the main branch language. Spellings are being constantly changed, meanings are being constantly changed, and I think this is still a reminder to us in this day, kind of like the rainbow in the sky is a reminder of the flood that God has set to remind us. I think this constant um, corruption and bifurcation of languages so that commonality is done away with is an ever-present part of that judgment. I think that's still an act of judgment that is upon humanity right now today. Uh, you know, 3 generations of Americans living in the same house. Sorry, my hands are getting a little bit tired. Whatever. That's why the camera jumped, because my arm jumped, because I'm fatiguing it holding the camera. But anyway, uh, but you get 3 generations of the same family living in the same house. And if there's any sort of multicultural or globalist influence in even one of those generations, then you're going to have a differentiation of language. Slang is going to be brought into the thing, communication is going to break down, and internally, the people who can no longer communicate are going to feel more and more isolated, and they're going to want to gather together with the people that do understand them. So I think that's the second half of it. I don't think it's just the language variance that's part of this judgment. I think this culture, society, this global norm of all of these things, where the more that people talk about striving for global unity and everything being diverse and inclusive and everything else, the more people struggle for that, to try to artificially eradicate the differences that God has built into our personalities, into our genome, into our appearances. He made us all unique and individual for His pleasure, and I think the more we try to overcome that, is more and more rebellion against God's planned for individuality and uniqueness in and amongst his image bearers. And so I think that this age where everything is being digitized and everything's on social media and everybody's supposed to come together and stand for and be aware of and understand the plight of everything else. I think that is why this age where all of that is the focus is actually leading people to become more and more internally isolated and feel more and more cut off from anybody, feeling like they don't actually relate to anybody. And there's no commonality that they can have with anybody that's genuine. And I think that is part the same thing as a language degradation. I think that's part of the same ongoing judgment against mankind from the Tower of Babel on today, and will be done away with during Jesus' reign. I think the difference in languages is going to be one of the first things to go, the first evidence that the truthfulness of the Lord has been brought to bear and the curse has been lifted, other than the geography and the geology is going to be reset to pre-flood days. I think that there's also going to be the restoration of a truly global language. The same things that are going to be attempted by the Antichrist and the Beast system of globalization and everything else, Jesus is actually going to truthfully bring about with the restoration of one global language and everything else. But this is one of those things where, like, the scripture doesn't say these things specifically, but if you follow what's happening, if you follow the course and the trajectory of everything all the way back to its genuine origins, it only makes sense. There are some thought experiments that every once in a while, like, I'll get it in my head. Okay, well, how do we know that? And I'm not going to teach this because it's not true. I have this thought sometimes because I deal in end times topics. I have this thought sometimes like, well, how do we really know? Almost like the famous actor that I just posted a video about changing his stance on biblical scriptural interpretation. How do we know that the tribulation of Israel and the judgment period on the earth for those that are left behind are the same period of time? Is there anything that says that they're the same period of time? And the answer is yes. It's a simple fact that you read Revelation in chronological order and everything happens inside of that same time frame, and it is the 7 years that's spoken of in Scripture. There can only be one answer to it, but because of the temptation to create openings for questions, to invite mysteries that aren't there, and to have one seem to others to be a better steward or student and scholar of Scripture, to make things up and to say, well, what if that was the very first interaction that Satan had with man that led to our downfall? Did God really say? So yes, to answer the question, in case I ever approach this subject again, you can stop me. The answer is yes. The trials and tribulation of Jacob are the same period of time that the judgment of God upon the earth is happening, that we know broadly and jointly as the tribulation. They are not separate things, okay? So let that be answered. But I do think, speaking of in terms of this internal isolation that people feel even when they're in the middle of big cities, large crowds, huge communities, or whatever, I do think that is the soul level disbursement to go along with the generational slang and everything else, the breakdowns of common languages continuously, generation by generation, year by year even, that started all the way back at the Tower of Babel. And I don't think it's going to go away until Jesus begins his reign and does away with the curse and brings us all back to um, what was supposed to be before uh, all of that stuff took place. So it's food for thought. Like I have this obsession that I don't really follow up on of learning as many foreign languages as I can. But like I said, I don't follow up on them. I get a little bit uh, into a few languages, and some I've made more headway on than others. Uh, but I don't. But knowing what I know of Scripture and of the removal of the curse, whatever, to me, it seems like a waste of time now to try to learn other languages. I don't know anybody in the languages that I'd wanted to learn that I talk to or interact with on a regular basis. So I stay fresh just in case I ever do meet one, and then I can build up on it then. But if I'm going to go from here into the Harpazo without ever meeting a single Russian or Ukrainian or Polish person that I can have conversations with, then I'd be wasting time. Because the next time I see anybody from those regions, when we come back here after the tribulation to witness the reign of Christ, we're all going to have the same language. So um, that I think that's just something for people to take into consideration. Every single nation, every single tribe has had access to the gospel in their own language, or at least some form of presentation that they can understand. That's what God has said. I think that's the real meaning of God has preserved His word. Everybody has been given a chance, over the last 2,000 years to hear and accept, or hear and reject, or hear and accept and then alter, or whatever. And you see that all over the world. So that's just, I don't know. I think that's the thing. I think the reason why we talk about Babylon in the end times and everything else, I think that's all still rooted in um, the Tower of Babel and those that rebellious thought of, well, we don't need God as long as we just band together. We don't have to depend on God if we all just see to the communal good and everything else, and as long as we can understand each other in any kind of way, then we don't need to listen to anyone but ourselves. And I think that is all of this uh, is still tied. I think all of this that's leading to this judgment, this entire chain of events, all started from that point. Um, well, actually, all started from the beginning of human history, but um, I think the Tower of Babel plays a more significant role in progressing these things than people give it credit for. So I think it's worth looking into in your own personal study and lay it alongside what's happening today with globalization, with these massive efforts for multiculturalism and the rise of the polyglot, people that speak multiple native languages and all this other thing. Um, while it has its place and it can be used for good, I think that it is. Um, I think it is indicative of the exactly how pervasive that judgment of God upon a rebellious humanity really was at Tower of Babel. But before I start babbling, because I am tired already, I'm going to end this video with, as always, Hebrews 11:6. Without faith, it is impossible to please God. Those who come to God must believe that He is, and that He is a rewarder of those who seek Him. And because we are very close to the prescribed judgment of this planet, I will say until next time, if there is a next time, and there might not be, God bless you and be with you no matter what language or slang or whatever you speak. And if you feel alone, God has made sure that you would not be left alone as orphans so long as you turn to Him and you don't reject him or rebel against him and seek your own way. So, having said that, I'm out of here. Until next time, maybe, maybe not.